Welcome to the first session in the online ColdFusion Summit. I'm Charlie Arehart, and I'll be your host for the next 45, 50 minutes. I guess do we have an hour? Is that the total time, or is it 50 minutes, 50?
It's whatever you want, Charlie. It's you. I give you
the
all
goal.
the time you need, buddy.
No. I'm going to try not to go over. So the goal is to be about 50 minutes to an hour, and we'll have time for questions. So welcome, everybody. And if you didn't know, these are going to be repeats of the sessions from the ColdFusion Summit in Vegas from October. So there's only 10 listed as of this morning, but there will eventually be 30. So all the talks that have been given will be offered, and I'm happy to be the first. And hello, Mark, and everybody else from Adobe, and hello to all of you watching. So let's go ahead and get started with Hidden Gems in ColdFusion 2023. So as you know, CF 2023, many of you would know, but those who don't, I want to make sure you know, it was released in May of last year. So we're approaching the year. So it's only been like 8, 9, 10 months, we'll say. And there may not be as much new about it as in past releases, but there's still plenty of hidden gems. And that's what we're here to talk about. And, to be clear, this isn't a talk that's going to go over all the new facets, because when I show you, you'll see why that isn't possible. Almost each of the new things could warrant an entire talk, and some of them will have additional talks in this online CF Summit. So again, this isn't really even an overview of all the new features, although by the nature of the way I'm doing it, you will find it is in a sense an overview of everything, but I'm going to try to identify and focus on things that are not so obvious. So what I call hidden gems, as I've done for most of the releases back to about CF 401, I believe was the first one I ever did. Hidden Gems in 401. You can Google it and find it. It was an article, in fact. Anyway, let's move on. So I also want to point out that there's plenty of resources for you to be aware of. There's a lot of things that you can look into. So again, this talk is not to be how do you use everything and what are all the facets of it. Again, couldn't be possibly done in any one talk. So I will point you to the resources, ample resources, and even stress how ample they are. So we'll make that point when we get there. And as I said, other sessions here in the Online CS Summit will have more details on other topics. And I want to say right now that everything I'm going to show you, including those links to resources, the CF Docs pages, blog posts, PDFs from Adobe or others, everything, I have the links in the slides, and the slides that you're now looking at, everything that I'm about to show you, you can just go get it either now or later. It's not important you get it now, and try to avoid the distraction of getting it now and trying to look ahead, because you're not going to hear what I'm telling you. Just hang out for the ride for the next 50 minutes. But anyway, the point is, when I show this big long URL, or if it's too tiny to see all of it, don't worry about writing it down. You can just go to the carehart.org/presentations, and I'll hop over there and show you. Here is that site, carehart.org/presentations. And I'm not seeing a preview, but you can see that, Mark, when I hop over to the browser. You're seeing that? Or anybody?
Yes, I am definitely seeing the browser right now.
There you go. So this is that site, carehart.org/presentations. The button's up at the top, old school. Someday I'll get it changed. Hey, at least I got dark mode. If your OS is set for dark mode, I switched to dark mode. Yay. Anyways, under presentations, here's Hidden Gems in CF 2023. And if you click on that, it jumps down to a description, and then a link to the PDF that I'm talking about. And then this recording, when it's posted, I'll offer it on there as well. All right, let's move on. So we're going to talk about hidden gems in things related to the CFML language changes and platform-related changes in CF 2023, and installation, deployment, administration, configuration, and monitoring changes, and then a bunch of other things like compatibility, migration issues, and a handful of other things that some people need to know, other people don't need to know. So just, again, sit back, relax, take in what makes sense to you, what's valuable to you, let the rest of it go, because we're talking to a lot of different people when we give this talk. About myself, for those who don't know, I just focus on server troubleshooting as an independent consultant. Don't work for anybody, Adobe, Integral, nobody. I'm independent. I work for myself. I assist organizations of all sizes, people of all experience levels. I work remotely nearly all the time, safe, secure, easy, via shared desktop. So if you have any problem, bring it to me. That's what I do. I solve most problems in less than an hour, and I teach you as we go how to solve the problem, how to diagnose the problem, how to connect the dots. And it's satisfaction guaranteed. If you don't find the time valuable, you won't pay for it. So there's no reason not to bring a problem to me. And you can learn more about my rates and approach and satisfaction guarantee and online calendar at carehart.org and the consulting button on that site we just looked at. To be clear, I'm not selling anything in this session, just sharing information as I've gathered it over the year plus that, some of us got to beta test CF 2023. So again, this is all that lessons learned. So as far as you learning more about it, again, I want to tell you the docs are substantial. And check this out, nearly everything that's discussed is new. They've got demo code, and grade A to Adobe folks who were involved in that for getting lots of demo code in those docs, because often in the past, sometimes there weren't much, or they weren't to people's satisfaction. I think you're going to find these are awesome. And Adobe had offered blog posts at the release of CF 2023 last May. So there's ample resources about it and lots of resources that point to still other resources. And I want to say, if you just want to start with a couple key things, on the Adobe Docs page, this link will take you there. That What's New page highlights the key top things that are new and offers a link to the details on them, which I'll offer to you in a moment. And then this was one of the blog posts they did back when 2023 came out. And I had done a blog post around that same time when it came out. And I point to the some various Adobe blog posts that were on that launch day. I point to those. Sometimes these other ones don't. So between the resources that are online, the docs, and these blog posts from Adobe and others, you can find ample resources for getting into what these things are. And you might go, I didn't think anything was new. Well, welcome to this talk. There's plenty new, and there's even hidden gems. But real quickly, one of the first major new things in CF 2023 is the Graphql Client, and Mark himself has done lots of talks and other presentations at the summit, after the summit, and we'll do one, I believe. I'll see in a moment. I wrote that down. Anyway, what is the Graphql Client? So it's a query language for accessing data via APIs. But instead of just old school, pull down some data and you get what you get, you do a query language against those APIs that are designed to support GraphQL. And there's a bunch of things out there already that do GraphQL. And here's the docs on using that new GraphQL capability. And in this talk, I don't have time to get into that. I can't even show it to you. Let me tell you, if you go to that page, and I'm going to take you there right now. Oh, get the right button. There you go. That's the page in the docs for the GraphQL, and you probably can't even see it because it's so tiny. That's the scroll bar in the top right corner. It's tiny because there's a lot of stuff here. And I'll just go page, and I'm not even 20% of the way down the page. This would be about, what did I say? I counted it. 36 pages. So if you do a print preview, you'll see it's about 36 pages with lots of samples. So again, don't worry. This talk doesn't need to be what's going to get you going. This is just to let you know it's there. Some of the hidden gems I want to point out, necessarily hidden. You could find them if you look for them, but the point is sometimes people don't think to look at things. There's some new functions related to it. We'll leave it at that. And this, and Mark, maybe you can speak to this real quick if you want to. At the summit, I believe it was at the summit, was mentioned that there is plans coming. Back then they said in a CF 2025, for you to expose your APIs via GraphQL with a new server capability. That's not in this current version. Mark, any quick thoughts on that as long as you're here?
Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, that is still planned. We are still planning on adding the ability to expose your own data through a GraphQL API. You can actually do that if you are familiar with using Apollo. You can actually expose it sort of manually, but it's a lot of work right now. We're trying to get that work difficulty down. So
excellent. And there was talk of a CF 2024 to come. You guys may not yet be talking about that, but is this still not likely coming until?
This will not make it into 24. This is actually a fairly non-trivial problem to solve on our side. There is a 24, and it is coming, and you will hear all about it in DC.
Awesome. In DC at the CF Summit East. For those who haven't heard about that, that's a real live in-person talk in April in the DC area, outside of Dulles, in fact. More hidden gems being shared. Thank you, Mark. Glad you shared those. Thanks very much. I appreciate that. All right, moving on. Then the next broad area of new functionality in CF 2023 is GCP, or Google Cloud Platform Integration. And It expands on the AWS and Azure integration that was added in CF 2021. And, some people are moving to 2023, never even used 2021. I'll get back to that later because you need to know some things that changed in 2021 when you're moving to 2023. And this is a aspect of that where they did some things with Azure and AWS. Now they're doing them with GCP. And again, man, the docs offer plenty of sample code. So go check that out. And I want to point out that there is a free tier, not only for AWS and Azure, but also for Google. You can get started with this stuff and explore it, and use it for production. And Google especially, theirs is pretty generous. And some people like to point out how you can, set up a production website on their free tier. You need, a license of ColdFusion to run ColdFusion. But anyway, moving on. So let's talk about what are the broad subject areas. Well, there's PubSub, GCP's publishing and subscribing message service, which is like the AWS SQS and Azure Service Bus that were added in 2021. Now this is added for GCP. And there's the link for that page with 50, count them, 50 pages of docs, and most of it sample code. And again, I want to show you so you don't go, oh, there's all that, a lot of stuff, but there's a lot of stuff. No, it's here it is. This is the PubSub page. And I'm just going to page down just a few pages after some screenshots. And boom, there starts to be discussions of the format of stuff being sent back and forth. And then here's CF script base. Hey, not tags for those that hate tags. Here's script base, CF script, doing calls out to do PubSub. And then it just goes on. Again, we're only like 15% down this page. And there's just more and more features with more and more examples. So let's leave it at that to say ample documentation and examples. Knock yourselves out, rock and roll, have a lot of fun. And there will be a talk tomorrow here on the online CF Summit. There's a session scheduled for tomorrow, and it's on ColdFusion and GCP. Oh, by the way, Mark, will you be doing a talk on GraphQL? I don't remember if you did one at the summit, but I didn't see it in the list when I was looking over it.
I will not. So my talk for online summit is going to be on AI. So
that's right. I saw that. Yep.
With AI.
And will anybody be doing a GraphQL talk? Or if not, there was the one that he did last year at the, it wasn't at the,
we did. Yeah. I can try and find a link to it. We did do a talk on GraphQL already. And I can find a link to it if anybody's interested in it.
Yeah, that'd be great. Because I knew you've done at least a couple and different variants. And so anyway, that's cool. If you can offer that, that'd be great. Well, let's move back to this GCP stuff. So the next broad area is Firestore, which is their implementation of Firebase, which is a NoSQL document database. And I'll just say again, there's ample discussion of it with examples at that page. I'm not even going to go there. And there will be a talk on that next week called GCP Firestore and ColdFusion 2023, the NoSQL Easy button. And that's Dave Ferguson giving that talk. And then cloud storage APIs, the third broad area of new functionality, and similar to what was done with AWS S3 and Azure. By the way, some of you go, S3, yeah, it's been supporting that forever. Yes, but in 2021, it was substantially improved and expanded upon, and similarly done for S3 as for Azure Blob Storage. Well, now 2023 does that for Google's cloud storage. So for those that are into that, go check it out. There's ample docs on that at that page. We'll leave it at that. Now, moving on, next broad area, going to be of real interest to some people. If you use the CF HTML to PDF tag, which was introduced in CF 11, 10 years ago, some of you don't still use it. You still use CF document. Nothing necessarily wrong with that. But CF document is not what we're talking about for those that do CF HTML to PDF. That's been improved in 2023 with a wholly new engine underlying it. And so whether you do the tag or the script equivalent of CF HTML to PDF, the point is your PDFs are going to be a whole lot better in 2023 because it's based on a new engine that Adobe has licensed and paid money for. You're saving a lot of money because you don't have to go get PDF Reactor. You can go check it out yourself later. They bundle PDF Reactor in ColdFusion 2023. Another benefit of paying for ColdFusion. Or if you get the developer edition, it's free. Anyway, moving on, It supports HTML5, CSS3, JavaScript, SVG, embedded audio and video. Again, things that were a challenge for the old CF HTML to PDF based on what it was based on, and the old CF document that by and large hasn't really had too much improvement. So really, if you want to do stuff and you find that producing PDFs out of CFML through these two tags isn't to your satisfaction, see if you don't find that CF 2023 just does the job better out of the box. And for those that used CF HTML to PDF when it came out 10 years ago, they'd had some limitations, and those have been lifted. So you can do lots more in headers and footers, for example, that you previously couldn't do with the old engine. And the new engine is on by default, and there's an admin setting, which we'll talk about later. And here's another big point for those who paid attention to this stuff over the years. Early, when that CF HTML PDF came out, it wasn't supported on, I believe it was Linux. Well, now this is made clear. This capability is on all the supported OSs that ColdFusion runs on. No problem. And some of you will be interested to know that a part of the improvement is a new conformance attribute for that tag CF HTML to PDF. There's a new conformance attribute, which is part of the ISO spec for doing long-term document archival. And it's got values like PDF A1A and A1B and blah, blah, blah. So if you're into that stuff, you're supported. That's the point. And again, ample documentation about it. Go check it out on your own. We'll leave it at that. All right, moving on. The next broad area of developer-oriented stuff that might interest some of you. Some of you are like, what? JSON Web Tokens, JWTs. And others will go, wait, what? JWTs? Yes. So you can now create, issue web tokens or verify those provided by other apps and APIs, yes, built into CFML. And like Mark said earlier about the other stuff being a server of GraphQL, of course, a lot of these things can be done manually. If you want to, find a Java library, you can get pretty much anything done. The beauty is that over time, CF just builds in more and more built-in support, and that's awesome. And that's great to hear that it's coming for the GraphQL server. But until then, you can do it yourself. And then this, maybe some of you are already doing your own thing with JWTs. You don't have to stop. This isn't going to break your thing, but it's got its own support for doing JWTs. And again, go check out the documentation for more on that. And some of the hidden gems parts I want to point out, if you didn't catch it, if you don't pay attention, if you only hear mention of it, it supports signatures and encryption, which is called JWE. It supports claims and headers and payloads. If that all stuff that makes sense to you, you can get it. And there are new functions related to it for creating signed and encrypted JWTs and verifying signed and encrypted JWTs. All right, the next broad area, again, you might go, wait, what? ABRO and Protuff, what are those? Well, these are two standards for doing schema-based serialization of data. Old school, again, JSON, blah, 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 it's a bunch of strings. With ABRO and Protuff, there's much more formal presentation, organization, metadata. We'll leave it at that. ABRO was developed originally by the Hadoop Big Data Project, and Protuff was developed by Google. It's protocol buffers. And the point is, these have been around for a long time. You could have found ways to make it work, even with CFML if you wanted to, but they're now built in. And there's support for simple and complex data types. And I'll just say, see the docs, which not only have more, but talk about the pros and cons. So awesome stuff. Glad to see it. Go explore. And, this is a good time to stop and say, I haven't heard anybody talk about this stuff. Well, that happens all the time because there's a new release that comes out and people are still focused on their old release and they're not even thinking about the new release. Some people don't think about the new release until 2 releases later. So we got people coming from 2018 to 2023 who didn't even pay attention to what was new in 2021. And now we got stuff that's new in 2023. And a lot of people aren't paying attention to it because they're not moving to it, or they won't move to it until after the next release. So these are kinds of examples of things that I find you don't hear anybody talking about it, but that doesn't mean that no one's using it. It doesn't mean that it's not useful. It's that maybe the people that are using it aren't the sort of people that like to write about it, talk about it. So you don't hear much about these new features, and I'm pointing them out to say, hey, these are kind of hidden gems. If you're into this stuff, go check it out. Have fun, knock yourself out. And here's the URL for learning more about that. And there are a couple of new functions like the other one. So it's serialize and deserialize, ABRO and Protuff. And the GCP pub sub stuff in particular leverages or can leverage this, but you can find other uses for it as well. I want to look up and see comments. Thanks everybody for the kind regards. And I'd like something like XML validate, but JSON validate using JSON schemas. Well, I'll leave anybody who wants to speak to it to say whether the stuff we just talked about, any of that stuff we've talked about, would address that. I believe you may find that it will, but I don't have that answer to give you. But anybody feel free to chime in if you've done any work with it. Well, let's move on. I want to wrap up that broad section of programming stuff with some still other things I've discovered. CF image, even though it's not documented, and please Adobe pay attention to this, it's not documented. There are new formats indicated that are supported by the CF image and the image related functions. And you might go, how'd you get that if it's not documented? I'll show you that in just a moment. But what it used to do, or has always done for a long time, is these, and now it does those up above. How did I find that out? Well, there's a function in CFML. Some people don't even know it exists. It's cool, another hidden gem, called get readable image formats. Which ones can it read? And get writable image formats. Which ones can it write? And I'm saying that I ran those functions. I do lots of stuff like this to explore what's new and find stuff that isn't necessarily documented. And those came out, those additional ones up top. Now, grant, saying 2000 doesn't look impressive, but I'm not into images and I don't know what that means. But the point is, it wasn't reporting that for 2021. It was reporting it for 2023, as well as PNM and RAW. And let me just jump in and say, someone's going to say, what about WebP? Nope, no current support for WebP. And again, Adobe folks hear that. A lot of people are complaining, even some recent discussions on the forums. Where is WebP support? Hopefully that's coming, but if nobody wants to chime in to talk about it, I'll understand. But let's move on and jump in, anybody from Adobe, if you want to interrupt me, don't mind that at all. Other new stuff that you might have missed if you didn't look for it is functions for XML clear and delete at and has child and update. CFML's long had XML functions, many of them. Well, these are new ones that do some stuff that some people needed, and so those things were added. How did I find those? Well, I found them by looking at the get function list function. So really meta stuff here. There's a get function list function in CFML that returns what functions ColdFusion has, and I found these, and that was different than before. So here you go, hidden gem, new functions, might excite you, might bore you. They're not in the CFML reference, at least when I checked it and had written this. I did find one of them documented, the one called XML Clear. But at the time I wrote this, I didn't find the others. I forgot to double check that before today. But it does have a live example. And one thing I'll also mention is that for those who haven't heard of it, cffiddle.org is an Adobe provided online tool on which you can run CFML against CF 2023 and CF 2021. And I think maybe 2018. It used to be. You could even go back to 2018. Anyway, CF Fiddle. If you've heard of TryCF, they're similar. And I'm pretty sure TryCF was around beforehand. But CF Fiddle's been around for a few years, several years almost. And again, you don't hear much talk about it. Because the people that use it just use it and go, well, I don't need to tell anybody. I'm just using it. And then other folks just aren't aware of it. And so check it out, cffiddle.org. And the cool thing is that a lot of the docs in the CF documentation for years have offered not only the code, but then a button that says, click here to run that code. And it hops out to cffiddle.org. And they'd saved that set of CFML. And any of you who want to go to CF Fiddle, you can create some CFML, run it. And if you're trying to share some knowledge with people or report a bug report, you can save what you're typing. You hit a button that saves it and you get a URL, and that URL you can then give to anybody. Anybody can run it. So anyway, not new, but leveraged by this capability. And these things, or at least that thing, does work as a member function. So you could say some XML object .clear. And notice it's not XML clear, it's just .clear. These member functions sometimes have different names because it's pointless to repeat the word XML. If you're applying it to an XML object, you're just clearing the object. So anyway, I'll leave you to look into that more on your own. CF Fiddle does still currently support CF 2018 update 19. And it also, he's noting that it supports update 12 of 2021 and update 6 of 2023. So that's another cool thing, is that it's also always the latest update So if you're ever hesitant to wonder, if I go update, will this code still work? Well, heck, you just go out to CF Fiddle and run the code, and it's always the latest version. Now, conversely, it's not ever the earlier version, so you can't compare earlier ones. You have to do that on your own. But anyway, it's great, and check it out. Some other changes to be aware of that are documented as bugs fixed. I just want to point this out because people often miss this because they go, I'm just looking at what's new. Well, sometimes people go, it doesn't work in this version. Well, it's fixed in the new version as a bug fixed. And so one of them is that member functions can be chained to struct and array literals. And you might go, oh, what's that? Hold on a second. So first, Brad Wood had raised it back in 2014 as a bug, and there's the bug ID and tracker.adobe.com. That's the bug tracker for ColdFusion. And it had not worked, but now it does. This code, for example, write dump of a foo::bar with a dot append, that's a member function to the result of that write dump foo.bar. He wanted to append bum.baz or bum.baz. So anyway, I'll leave you to explore this. If it makes sense, doesn't make sense, let it go. The point is it works now. And that's an example of a bug fixed. So something that didn't work now does work. That's not a new feature, but it's a working thing. There was a query filter problem. If you use the query filter, that was another relatively new thing. That didn't work. That's been fixed. And there's others, and I'm not going to list them all. I'm just going to say, if you're interested in checking that sort of stuff out, you go to the release notes. That URL there is to the release notes. And there's always a release notes for each version, pretty much always. And in there, there's a section called bug fixes. And so that goes to the anchor to the bug fixes. So again, look, for anybody that came along late, I know that's really tiny. Trust me, there's going to be some coming up that are even smaller. You can go get this presentation slide deck from my site. Look at the bottom right corner. It's carehart.org. And also, if you have any follow-up questions or comments, I'm at Carehart everywhere. So anyway, you can get these URLs from the PDF slide deck. So don't worry about writing that down. Just go get the slide deck. Okay, moving on. Okay, that was the broad area of development-oriented stuff. And some of you might go checking out now saying, I'm a developer, I don't care about this other stuff. No, time out. First of all, you should hear about this other stuff. And second, there's other stuff to follow. So this is, if you want to park your brain for a second, a few minutes, but don't, you should pay attention to this. First, there's a new thing called the CF Central Configuration Service, or CCS. And you might go, I don't need to do that. Well, hold on. So it is an optional feature, particularly for people that have one or more instances of CF that have identified in some sort of a group or an environment. You want to be able to move settings among those different servers or among those different kinds of groups or environments. And any changes you make in the admin are stored centrally and then propagated to the others in the group. And there's control over these things, there's ample control. And whether you change things in the admin or the admin API, or if you know about the CF setup tool that came out with CF 2021, anything you do that manipulates the admin, if you're using this CCS, it allows you to manage the deployment of those changes across other instances by server, by environment. So anyway, what I think is cool, even if you have only one server, is that it audits and monitors all changes to the admin. And check this out, it tracks version history and supports rollback. So if you've ever made a change to the admin and then found something broke, and maybe you don't know who did it, or you didn't do it, somebody else did it, and what was it before, and you maybe go, there's a backup file in the ColdFusion ZFusion live folder, but that gets overwritten, every time there's a change. There's only one version back. This is different. So I would recommend people consider the CCS even for a single server, because you get this version history of your admin setting changes. And I hope someday maybe that'll even be considered as a built-in feature, but we're not going to go there now. There are some settings that are not synced, and you should just be aware of this. And you might go, oh, that's half of the ones I do. Well, maybe not. Just be aware. So data sources, Java settings, scheduled tasks, things that involve passwords and paths, that's a little harder to do. I hope in time they'll sort whatever was the problem to get that to work. There must be some way to describe some metadata to make that stuff work. But for now, because they don't support that sort of stuff, some things can't be synced. But there are really several dozen other administrative settings that are going to be synced by this mechanism. So it is definitely worth your checking it out. And here's the link to learn more about it. And I'm just going to say, I've got, first of all, it's 12 pages if you printed it. So another substantial set of docs. And on these next two slide pages, I'm not going to go over them. I'm just going to skip through them and say, if you're interested in the CCS, CSS is a different thing. If you're interested in the CCS, read these slides later. I'm going to skip past them because we're short on time. And I anticipated that we would be at this point. And I was torn about not including them at all, but I thought, they'll be there. If you want to read them, you read them later, but let's move on. All right, moving on. This is pretty cool. Check this out. Again, this is an administrative thing, but you might be someone who works in an environment where you don't get access to the administrator because people say we can't have one administrator username and password that everybody uses. Now, some of you know that that's not the way it has to be, but hold that thought. Others say, even if we could tell the CF admin to have different usernames and passwords, we don't want to do that. We want to be able to have usernames and passwords of the administrator be managed through LDAP or Active Directory or SAML, single sign-on. Yeah, you can do that. CF 2023 adds the ability to have, in effect, single sign-on capability, LDAP, centralized username by the CF admin. So it's new options enabled on the security page, the security section button on the left. Go to the administrator page and choose that you want to do a separate username and password. Now, that's not new. That capability to do separate username and password has existed for a long time. What's new is you can say, I want to do external authentication. So that would be where you could say, I want to do a SAML setup or a LDAP setup or an Active Directory setup. And then you'd configure users in the user manager section of the admin, choosing an external user and picking whatever user or group from whatever SAML or LDAP you use. And you do have to have configured that resource in the IDP or SP. Those are new features. The SAML stuff was new in 2021. And then here's the docs for that. And I want to add a couple more little hidden gems. This does not apply to RDS login processing. So if you know what that is, don't worry, for better or worse, this doesn't apply to that. It's just who can get into the admin, giving different people their own username and password, as it were. And that's not new. That capability to define different users for the admin has been around for decades. I did an article in 2009 on it, and it was on the Adobe DevNet website, which is that subset of the Adobe site is no longer there. But I found on the web.archive.org, the good old Internet Archive, there's that URL. I know it's long, don't write it down, just get the PDF. But if you want to read about, hey, how could I define users to use the administrator? That's not new, been around for a long time. This is just a new way to expand upon it to use SAML or LDAP. And this stuff can also be controlled from the admin API or the CF setup tool, if you know what that is. And again, see the docs for ample examples showing that stuff. It's literally in there, all that stuff for those who use those for automation, right? Let me be clear. You don't have to do everything in the CF admin. You can automate lots of stuff through the admin API as code, through the CF setup as command line or JSON files. But again, that was new in 2021. We're not going to cover that today. Just a little bit later, but not much more. So moving on, other admin changes to be aware of. There's a new SSL enabled capability for Redis caching. If you know about that, that was added in 2021. And support for GCP features also added new admin features. So remember, this is the admin section. So those that are into the managing the admin, if you're going to use the GCP stuff, there's a new set of pages for that called Cloud Credentials and Cloud Configuration, where you configure these external services like GCP, AWS, and Azure. And then the PDF stuff we talked about, that's got a page in the CF admin called Data and Services, and you go to the PDF service page to see that control, and the default again is 2.0. And then there's a bunch of admin and install configuration related things that are discussed in that bugs fix page. So again, there's the URL, and I'm saying if you're an administrator, you should look at that bugs fix page. It's not about code only, it's also about admin stuff, and you might be shocked to find some stuff. There's also a known issues thing at the top of that page that might give you some insight into some issues that you trip over that maybe very, very few other people trip over. Well, it's a known issue. It's on you to learn about that. But I don't have time to get into all of that. Now, also, just real quickly, I don't want to go over this because this is new, but I want to be clear, CF 2023 offers many ways to install and deploy your ColdFusion. There's a full, or what they call GUI installer. It's got silent install, and there's the docs for that. There's the zip installer that was added in CF 2021 that also can optionally silently install, and there's the link for that. You've long been able to do J2EE or JEE war deployment, war ear deployment. That's discussed in the docs. Command box had, and this was back when it came out. I was making sure people knew that there was already a slug for CF 2023. So that was that. And then I want you to know as well, some of you do, some of you don't, you can deploy ColdFusion as Docker containers on Kubernetes, on OpenShift, whatever you want. That has been around since CF 2016 is when the first ones were 2016. A lot of people don't know about it, but there's the doc page for how to use them and where to find them at Docker Hub and ECR and other places. And I've done talks on it, including one on how they have evolved, because they have evolved over the years with more and more capability. And so I did a whole talk on how the Docker images from Adobe have evolved. I've also done talks on other images from RDS and from Lucy. So again, if you're into Docker, I've got multiple presentations that might interest you. I'll just say I haven't found anything new about configuring them, but I just wanted you to be aware. These are different ways to deploy CF 2023. You don't have to install it. You can do Docker. You can do the AMI from AWS. There's an AMI for, and that's an Amazon machine image for 2023 for both Windows and Linux. And there's how you can find those. You just go to the marketplace and search for the word ColdFusion, and you will find them for 2023 and 2021. And then Azure's VMIs, or virtual machine images, that's also supported on both Windows and Red Hat and Ubuntu and Alma, which is interesting because I'm realizing now I've had people ask if CF supported Alma, and it's not listed on the support matrix, but the AMIs or the VMIs, it did list a VM image on Azure that would run on Alma. So that implies that it does run on Alma. Mark or anybody else, I'd love to hear. Maybe we can start telling people that, yes, CF does run on Alma. It is supported. But anyway, this is just talking about the VMIs. I'll leave it at that. I don't want to start any hornet's nest openings. So anyway, there's the URL to find out more about that. And GCP images, to be able to do Google's equivalent of AMIs and VMIs, those were in the works. Mark, you'd actually said that, I believe, at the summit. And if you have any new information to either speak or write, feel free.
They're days away. They're
days away. Awesome. Yeah. Days away. Great.
Yeah, so, a lot of administrative stuff we had to work through, Charlie, but none of it was technical. It was all signing things and
Oh, sure. I understand.
So yeah, almost ready to go.
But I was just glad to point out that it was coming. The even better news is that it's really coming. That's awesome. Great to hear. Thank you very much. All right, moving on. The PMT, the Performance Monitoring Toolset that was introduced in CF 2018. It is not new. It's 5 years old, 6 years old. It works with 2018, 2021, 2023. That has been updated. Here's the discussion of the PMT in general, and then here's what's changed. It adds capabilities to monitor GCP and Firestore and PubSub. Also upgrades the underlying Elasticsearch engine for the data store. Again, I'm going over this real fast. If you don't understand the PMT, I get it. Don't worry. You can read about the first bullet point. There's ample docs. The data store also takes less space and has improved performance because of that change. And there is now support for TLS and SSL. So if you want to learn more about that, there's how to configure the TLS or SSL support in Elasticsearch for use with the PMT. Moving on. Some other hidden gems in the admin. We got back the ability to do the display of CF logs in the CF admin. That was taken away for a time in 2021 because of the security feature. It was brought back in 2023. Don't think it's been brought back to 2021, and I'd love to hear why and if that's coming. But anyway, moving on. That is there in 2023. And the CF, check this out. For those of you that install CF on Windows, the Windows installer now sets up a start menu, not just for whoever installs CF, but for all users. That was something I actually requested some years ago, and I'm glad to see that's finally there. If you don't use Windows, it doesn't matter to you. Moving on. Compatibility migration issues. Some of you are like, oh, that's what I need to hear. That's the most important thing. Well, I got good news for you. There's really not any issues. If you're coming from 2021, there's virtually not much to worry about. But as with each version, if you're skipping prior versions, like if you're coming from 2018, then you got to worry about what changed in 2021. And I'll just say, in my talks on hidden gems in each version, I talk about these compatibility issues. So you could look at the hidden gems for 2021 and learn about what were compatibility issues coming from 2018 to 2021. And now here we're talking about what's 2021 to 2023. But I'll say I also put together a talk called Migrating Apps to 2023 from earlier versions, and I cover from 2021, from 2018, from 2016. So again, if whatever version you're coming from, I got you covered. Check out the presentation. And also I've got one called Migrating or Comparing CF admin settings between instances and versions and engines, meaning across CF and Lucy if you're interested. So anyway, that's a whole talk. And remember, those talks, the recordings and the PDFs, they're at carehart.org/presentations. Moving on. Sid said it has not. I'm sorry, I wasn't paying attention. I've been looking up, trying to keep an eye on it. So I'm not sure what the it has not is referring to. If you can let us know, I'd appreciate it. Some other issues, just want to say real quick, if you're skipping from 2018 or earlier, be aware the most significant issue for most people was that CF 2021 changed the meaning of the date format functions, capital D, for formatting. It used to mean the same as the lowercase d, which was day of month. Starting in 2021, it now means day of year, and that's a big deal after January. So be very careful. You could trip over some serious problems with your app, and database data. And I don't have time to get into it now, but I'm just saying it affects the date format, date time format. It's not new in 2023, but it was new in 2021, and it's still true in 2023. And if you don't want to go figure this problem out, you just want to revert it back to, hey, treat capital D like it was a lowercase d, then you just add this argument to the JVM args of the CF startup. And I'm not going to go into that now, but there's the path or the argument, the name of it, the value to set it to. Use day as month as true. Okay, use D as day as month is true. See that migration talk as well as the CF docs on the date format function. It lists that up there, and I had reported as a blog as a problem back in when it came out. So I got links to my blog post with more as well. But let's move on. That's not new in 2023. Other changes that were new in 2021. Again, I'm not going to go over these in detail. I just want you to be aware. 2021 changed the way CF was designed to be modular and be really small out of the box for the zip or the containers, and then they would implement a core package that you could add new packages to through the admin or through environment variables or through the CFPM tool that was new in 2021. Again, if you do the full installer, the traditional installer, you don't have to worry about this stuff. You just get all the packages, but you'll hear people talking about packages, and that's what that's about. And here's a doc on it. Again, go read that on your own. And I've done presentations on it. I did one just a couple weeks ago on understanding the package manager feature. Not new in 2023, but I'm saying these are things that you come to 2023 need to be aware of. Same with the CF setup tool I mentioned earlier, and it can export and import JSON settings and use those in an environment variable in a container and blah, blah, blah. So anyway, check out the docs for that. I did a talk on that as well, complete talk on that subject alone. And then CF 2021 started requiring you to activate when you license CF. If you drop in a license key, you get activation of that key now. And there's a ample discussion in that page about that. So I'm going to move on. Charlie said he didn't know it had been added back to 2020. Oh, sorry. Back means back in 2023. There you go. That date format issue. Yeah. So you just add that JVM arg, problem solved. Now, if you go to my blog post on the discussion of the topic, I also point out that there are regexes that a couple folks shared as comments. And you can search your code with either VS Code or CF ColdFusion Studio even, or HomeSite Plus or Notepad++ or CF Builder. Anyway, moving on. There you go. Yep. It's good to have updated your code because, you know, it's in the end better to do that and not to worry about carrying forward this boat anchor of the JVM argument change. I do wish they had just changed it to say, hey, if you want to use capital D as a day of year, add this JVM argument, but it's water under the bridge. Can't complain about it now. We're moving on. That was 2021. It's still true in 2023. Let's wrap up with other key things. So Java has been updated in 2023 to Java 17, and it's 1706 out of the box. And the latest version from this last month was 17010. So it's on you to update that. I have a blog post on doing those updates, and I always talk about when a new one comes out. CF 2021 and 2018 ran on Java 11. And CF 2016 ran on Java 8 and then 11. And 17 came out back in 2021, and those other versions don't support it, but 2023 does. So 17 is a relatively new 3 years ago. And perhaps a future update of 2021 will bring support for Java 17. but we're just talking about 2023 here. And 17 includes changes that were introduced in Java 12 through 16. So it's a pretty big change. And don't confuse it with the updates like 11.017, 11.018. We're talking about Java 17. It's much more recent in terms of its capabilities and features than Java 11, although 11 is still updated. It got an update in January as well. So anyway, I don't get confusing right now. I just want to say most of these changes in Java 17 will benefit only Java developers who change their code, but some of them may eventually accrue to us as Adobe leverages them. So for most people, it doesn't matter that CF runs on Java 17, but some people wanted it to. It does now, and we may see benefits of that. And you could leverage Java that supports Java 17 stuff through CF Object, Create Object, CF Java, which is new in 2021. For those who don't know, CF 2021 added the ability to put Java right into your CFML pages. And some people like that. Lucy's just added that recently, so it's not a crazy idea to, only Adobe thought of. But anyway, the point is that's another subject. I just want to talk about a couple things that you might take advantage of or want to be aware of. The conch mark sweep or CMS, that got removed in Java 14. So that's no longer supported in Java 17. Therefore, it's no longer supported with CF 2023. So if you've been using CMS, conch mark sweep, as your garbage collection, you can't. You got to pick something else. CF out of the box comes with parallel GC and has always, and it's been great. And it's rare that people need to change it. But they also added ZGC and Shenandoah. And if you want to try to check those out, you can. And then here again is parallel GC. And then Java 17, if you didn't specify one in any Java app you ran, the default would be G1 GC, ColdFusion hard codes, parallel GC, because they find that to be best for most people's needs. But anyway, you can change these things to your heart's content. Another new Java 17 thing called CDS, I'll leave you to explore that. And also there are more informative error messages on NPEs, null pointer exceptions. One last thing I want to say is Java Security Manager, if you know what that is, that has not been removed. It's been deprecated. And if you're into this discussion, you've heard that, but it's not gone yet. But the CF Sandbox security feature uses the Java Security Manager. So time will tell about that. And again, if we had time, I'd love to hear from anybody at Adobe on that. But let's move on. Tomcat was updated to 9.072. That's great. It came originally on top of 9.072, and then the update in October even raised it to 9.078. So that's good, and that was for 2023 and 2021. The updates then raised it to 9.078. It's still not the latest. No, they're always going to be behind. There's always a lag. The current latest from last month is 9.085, and some subsequent update should bring us to that. So let's move on. Deprecation, great news. Not much deprecated in CF 2023. That's great to see. Again, those coming from 2018 should look at what changed in 2021 to see if there were deprecations there. And here's the URL for seeing deprecations in ColdFusion. Processing and licensing, no change. Great news there. No changes in addition differences between standard and enterprise. As for the EULA, there was just one change that I found, and it's this definition of computer was changed to this definition of computer, and it makes a particular point about VMs. So again, in the interest of time, I'll leave you to read about it if that interests you. We don't have time to discuss that right now. One other point is backup and disaster recovery are now include failover. So you can use failover servers under the conditions of using backup and disaster recovery. And again, you'll read about how that's allowed. And the licensed HTML is a file that's in the root of your ColdFusion directory, or you can Google it and find it. As far as end of life, just real quick, I want you guys to know, when does the different versions of CF reach end of life? When do they no longer get updates? You need to be aware of this. 2023, we'll get them for 5 more years. 2021, we'll get them for 5 years from when it came out, which was November of 2020. So in November 2025, CF 2021 will no longer get updates. 2018, if you're still on it, hey, those stopped getting updates in July. You are now, 8 months behind. There are security updates. There were ones in August and November that you didn't get because they stopped getting them in July. 2016, again, 5 years after it came out, they stopped getting updates in 2021. So you don't want to be running on old versions, but I know people have their reasons for dragging their feet, can't make changes. We're getting off of ColdFusion. We're not going to bother. And then 5 years later, they're still on ColdFusion. CF11 ended in 2019, so I'm just not going to keep going. Here's the page where you can find that information. It's not just Charlie's information. It's on the Adobe website at this EOL matrix about all Adobe products. And they list even CF11 still and tell you when it ended. And I've done a blog post about when 2018 ended its life coming up. I warned you in January of last year. It was coming up in July of last year. Moving on. CF Builder has a bunch of updates. Let me back up and say, if you didn't know, there is a VS Code, Visual Studio Code. There is a Visual Studio Code-based version of ColdFusion Builder. Did you know that? And did you know it was free? VS Code is free. ColdFusion Builder extension from Adobe is free. You might think everybody knows that. I can promise you, everybody does not know that. Heck, some of you are going, what's VS Code? Just trust me. People do not, everybody thinks everybody's moving on. No, there's a lot of people still editing with Notepad or Notepad++ or their favorite Mac editor or their favorite Linux editor, Vim, whatever. So I'm going to move on and say it came out in July, not of last year, a year before that. It has been out for now, a year and a half plus. And if you go to the Adobe VS Code extensions button in VS Code and go to the marketplace, do the search, it'll search the marketplace. Boom, Adobe ColdFusion Builder. There it is, from Adobe for free. For free. It's not like the old one where you paid for it. It's free. The prior one was based on Eclipse. And that Eclipse one is no longer updated. That was last called Adobe ColdFusion Builder 2018. That no longer is updated. You shouldn't be using it anymore. I know some people still are because people just, you get your hands on an editor and that's your editor. And it's really hard to grasp it out of your hands. But you should check out VS Code. You should check out the free CF Builder extension. And I could do a whole talk and will at some point do a whole talk on it because I'm sure some of you want to chime in with how it didn't work for you and why it didn't work for you. And it doesn't, blah, blah, blah. This isn't the time to talk about that. Here's one of those really long URLs. I'll just tell you, I wanted to keep it all on one line. So when you get the PDF and you click on it, it needs to be on one line when you click on it in the PDF. So I know it's a long line. It's tiny. You can't read it. It's not supposed to read it. Just get the PDF and click on it. I want to point out that the data was updated to support CF 2023 with the new tags and functions and statements and attributes. So that's great. And it's updatable in the VS Code tool itself. Those who use it know it. Those who don't will learn how that works. And the current version is actually from last month. If you're not on the one from last month, be aware there was an update last month. It's 10507. And again, I'll leave you to look into that. And then here's what was new. That's a big, long URL of what was new in that update. We'll leave it at that. ColdFusion updates since the release. I just want you to be aware there have been 6 updates. So if some of you say, I don't want to use a new version until it's a 0.1 release, well, it's on its 0.6 release, if you want to put it that way. ColdFusion has had 6 updates. The first 3 were security updates. The first 4 were security updates. And then 5 was a bug fix update and a couple of tweaks, new features and stuff. And then 6 was a security update. So you should be on 6. It came out in November. It's been out for what, 4 months already. All right. So anyway, I'm going to move on. Talked about that. Yep. I mean, I mentioned some things. I'll leave you to look at that. And some of these most complete updates to a recent security problem were not applied to 2018 because it ended in July. So you really need to be on 2023 or 2021. Okay. And there were new installers in October. Some people don't know this. In October, Adobe made available new installers of CF 2023. So if you go get them since October from Adobe's website, you get a new installer that's not the same as the one that you got between May and October. And it includes Update 5 already. And sometimes there's other reasons that it's different. So I'll just say you should be trying to use the more recent installer. Let's wrap up with a quick overview. Just a few minutes left. I want to try to finish on time and leave more question time. Just a few overviews of what are changed versions of libraries and other things like OS and databases. So first, here, just don't worry, we're not going to go over it. Each of these are things that are built into CF, and some people care what version they are. And this is my attempt to look into them every time there's a new release and track what are their versions and what are they about if you don't know what they are. And that will leave it at that. Look at the box at the bottom. It says these are the numbers as of the original release. And then the bolded values are how they are different from the last CF 2021 update at that time. So I was basically showing you how 2023 has improved things that were different in the previous release. And I just noticed I have ABRO and Protuff bolded. They weren't supported in the prior release. So that's just a little bit of a mistake. But otherwise, most of the stuff should make sense to those who care. I'll leave it for you to look into that. Now, wrapping up, database versions. Check this out. I want to make sure you hear this. Formal support for older databases has been dropped. Formal support. They may still work, but formally they're not supported. Where's SQL Server 2016? Gone. Where's SQL Server 2012? Gone. Where's SQL Server 2008? Gone. Can you only use SQL Server 2019 or 2022 with CF 2023? No, you can still use them, but Adobe formally doesn't support anything but 2019, which is a whole dang 5 years ago. How can they be so, nasty as to drop support for something more than 5 years ago? It's just, come on, let's move on, folks. It's time to move on. Same with MySQL 5. Nope, no more support for MySQL 5. Can you make it work? Get the right drivers, all that, blah, blah, blah. Yeah, but again, formally, what's supported is MySQL 8, Postgres 14, Derby 10.11. And then if you run CF Enterprise, you may know there's drivers for DB2, and it's 11, and Oracle 19C. And again, I know a lot of people use Oracle. You're, oh, wait a minute, what about 11? Gee, how do you use 11? It's not formally supported anymore in 2023. It was in 2021. It's not in 2023. It's time to move on. I can't move to 19. It's going to take us months to do that. Well, I know people that are running CF 2023 with Oracle 11, so I'm not saying it's not going to work, but I'm saying formally it's not supported. You just need to be aware of it. That is the formal facts, Jack. And there's the URL for the support matrix. That literally has a typo with only one P. That PDF URL will work anyway. And then if you're using Azure and AWS and GCP versions of database as a service, all their variants, there's a documentation of the versions of those. I'll leave you to look into that if you're interested in that. What about operating systems? What's formally supported? Well, no Windows Server 2012 or 2008. Nope, not there anymore. Formally 2016, yay, but not anything older. Windows 11 and 10, that's probably pretty cool for most people. Mac OS 13. Hey, what about just that's what's supported right now? Okay, both ARM and Intel-based processors are supported. Yes, both ARM and Intel are supported. If you are installing the Mac OS installer and you have trouble, in the release notes it talks about you might need to add this XATTR X attribute, XATTR minus RC. I'll leave you to try that on your own. It has worked for some people to solve problems when they brought that up in the community, and I pointed that out. And then Red Hat and Ubuntu and SUSE. And literally, these are the words from the support matrix. So when they say "and later," that's from the support matrix. So the implication is they're supporting later versions too. Curiously, Ubuntu 22 doesn't say "and later." I'm just sharing information. You can follow up with Adobe about that. Same with Solaris 11.4. That's all it lists. And then lastly, other things you should be aware of. It supports IIS 10. It supports Apache 2.456 and later. It says that literally. Java servers, it supports this WebLogic, that WebSphere, that Tomcat, that JBoss, that Wildfly. I'm going to leave it at that. We're not here to discuss all those details. Finally, some of you may have heard, but if you haven't heard, Adobe's giving away a gift card in these webinars for the Online CF Summit. Thank you very much, Adobe. It's $50. And they've asked us as presenters to do a little quiz. So it's quiz time. And so we're watching the chat. And the first person that writes in the correct answer will win that gift card. So here's the question. What is the oldest version of CF that's still getting updates? And the answers are A, 2023, B, 2021, C, 2018, D, 2016. And the first answer that was correct it went by real quick. It was B. Sorry. Who was that first person that said B? Oh, good. They're flying by. Every time I go up, it goes down. Well, somebody said 20. Oh, goodness, gosh. Come on. How do we do this? We didn't think about that, did we? The words. Okay. Dave Ferguson was the first one to say 2021. We could argue he didn't wait for the answer. Like if this is Jeopardy, we'd say he didn't answer it in the form of a letter, A, B, C, or D, but we won't be cranky. And so Dave Ferguson, congratulations. You were the first one to say 2021. And everybody else, yep. I'm not going to say any of that stuff. All right, let's move on. So quickly in summary, lots of changes beyond just the major features that you might hear highlighted in typical things. And I hope you're now motivated and informed to go considering using CF 2023. Again, if you have follow-up questions for me, feedback, you want to share it with me directly or just send it to Twitter, Slack, GitHub, Facebook, X, of course, LinkedIn, Skype. I'm at Arehart, very easy to find and reference. So with that, that's the end of it. Sorry, we're a couple minutes over. I've tried to answer questions as we went. Rather than have me go back and try to find an unanswered question, if you have a question that you'd asked that we haven't answered, would you please just go, you could find it and copy and paste it if you want, or just type it again right now. Thank you very much for the kind comments from people about the presentation. If you got to go, we understand if you got to go, but if you can stick around, Mark might have something more to say. In fact, I'll shut for a second, and Mark or anybody want to say anything while we wait for any questions to come in. Thanks again, everybody, for the kind regards.
Yeah, fantastic. Thank you so much, Charlie. And thank you all for attending this amazing session. I know I learned stuff, and I'm sure you all did as well. Like Charlie mentioned, if you have questions, you can put them in the chat. You can put them in the Q&A. Or if you're on CFML Slack, you can also post them there. We'll try and get them over to Charlie to answer as well. You could always email Charlie. Yeah. What's your email, Charlie? Right there, Charlie at
Arehart.org.
Yep.
Charlie. Oh, well, sorry, I shared it earlier. I'll put it in here. Charlie at Charlie at Arehart.org. But it's on the slides earlier on. And then let me also say, since you mentioned, and by the way, there's a question: will the slides be available soon? Who's going to be the first one to answer that question for him?
Dave Ferguson.
Susan, thank you, Susan. So the answer to that question is they're already available. Morrow. Yeah, I get it. You didn't catch the beginning, maybe, where I pointed this out. And I said it a few times during, because I understand people come along late or they're missing a sentence here or there. If you look at the screen currently, you should still be able to see my screen in the bottom right corner. That's my website, Arehart.org. And there's a presentations button right at the top. And at the top of the presentations list are the most recent. And this one is up there second from the top. Anyway, you might have been wondering if Adobe was going to be offering some central location of the PDFs, and they don't tend to do that, but the recording will be sent to you after this session by email, and then eventually there will be a central place where the recordings of all the online CF Summit sessions will be posted as a group, and we'll hear more about that when that comes out. So here's a question.
We got a couple of questions.
Exactly. So Peter asked, getting ready to install 2023 Enterprise in a Windows-based IIS cluster. Any best practices documentation to walk through the process? Well, let me just clarify, if you're asking about the particulars of Enterprise and Windows and IIS cluster, I'll say there's not necessarily any good things to walk you through those particulars, but let's be clear, there are definitely docs and presentations that I and others have done on installing CF 2023. And in fact, let me just tell you real quick, I literally did one in December. I believe it was December, not January. So if you go to my site there, Arehart.org/presentations, you'll see there's 169 presentations there going back 20 years, and they're all, the new ones are up at the top, and you'll see about 4 or 5 from the top is installing ColdFusion 2023. And I talk about the ins and outs of installing it. Now, Enterprise doesn't matter. Let me be clear. And this is something people need to hear. There is not a different installer for ColdFusion Enterprise. There's not a different installer for ColdFusion Standard. There's not a different installer for ColdFusion Developer. There's not a different installer for ColdFusion Trial. There is one installer for those 4 things. There's different installers for different operating systems, but there's only one installer for the operating system. And that installer, when you install it, among the first questions is, hey, you're going to use production and enterprise or standard, and so give me the license key. And if not, you can do it later. And you can say, no, I just want to do a trial, or I just want to do the developer edition. And if you do the trial edition after 30 days, if you haven't put in a license key, it reverts to the developer edition. Now, I cover that sort of stuff in the talk, and it's available, documented online. Just saying that it's an understandable question. Now, you really were looking for best practices, and you're saying IIS clustered environment. Well, ColdFusion has support for clustering in ColdFusion Enterprise, and there's documentation about doing that. there haven't really been too many recent new resources offered on it. So if you want to reach out to me directly, I might be able to give you some more specifics. And I do want to do a talk on that topic of CF clustering and enterprise, but you're probably not even talking about that. You're just probably going to use some external clustering capability. And no, there's no good particular resource, I would say, that covers that well. But there's different facets of using CF administration configuration, CF coding configuration. There are different facets that could lead to what someone might call best practices, but I'm not aware of any document that specifically goes over that. So let me move on to the next question. Is there an effort to get more host providers to offer CF as part of their service? Adobe has a few listed on their website, but some of them are either out of business or don't offer CF anymore. Now, I know you're not showing my screen, or are you? If I back up.
Yeah.
Oh, you are. Okay, cool. Let me do this real quick. I want to address 2 points that were raised. So on my website, carehart.org, Mark mentioned in passing the CFML Slack, and some of you might go, wait, what? There's a CFML Slack? So let me tell you guys, to answer both that question and this, if you look at the URL at the top, it says carehart.org/CF411. Or if you just go cf411.com, that redirects to my carehart.org/CF411. And it's a resource that I've been keeping for 20 plus years, was updated last week. So I keep it up to date. And there's resources in the first section, and then tools in the second section. And then this whole page has all those categories of resources and tools. Well, if we just look right here, first of all, ColdFusion help, I want to point out, here's help. I know when I mouse over it in the dark mode, you can't read it. That's another issue to be dealt with, but moving on. Help mechanisms for CFML, community forums, social media, Slack, Stack Overflow, and more. So if you click on the link for this table of contents up at the top, it jumps down in the page to the discussion. And here I say, look, there are several resources out there, and there's the CFML Slack. Again, when I mouse over, you can't see it, but if you click on that, you're taken to the login sign up, the sign up form for the ColdFusion Slack, or you're taken to it if you're already on Slack, the ColdFusion Slack. And there's the Adobe ColdFusion forums, there's the Adobe portal, there's email addresses from Adobe you can send to, there's a Facebook CF programmers group, Lucy forums, Ordis forums, Reddit for ColdFusion, and then Stack Overflow, Server Fault, Experts Exchange, and Mark Kruger even has an Ask a Muse page. So anyway, that's the where to find help thing. Now the question was, what about hosts? Well, if you look up here, I've got hosting right there, right? How can I do that without it turning that ugly color? Hosting, there you go. Hosting alternatives. There it is. Anyway, hosting alternatives for CFML. Let me just answer that question. I keep this list up to date, and I point to about 10 there. And look, I tell you whether they offer shared or virtual or dedicated, and what CF version they support as of when I checked it. And sometimes this changes, and I'll come in and check it and change it. But the point is, you won't find any here that are out of business. You won't find any here who don't offer ColdFusion. That's all I offer here. These are them. And these are the ones that I hear discussed the most. There might be some other ones that I haven't heard discussed, but they're listed somewhere. And in fact, at the bottom, I offered that link you talked about called the Adobe CF hosting list. And I don't know who's responsible for that. And if it's out of date, Mark, I hope will take note of that and somebody will attend to it. But it's, this I am responsible for, and I keep it up to date. When installing CF, and by the way, if there's any follow-ups, I'll get to it in a moment, but let me just keep looking. When installing CF, it asks for a deployment type, like testing, right, production. How do I change this later? So let me just say quickly, that's something I talk about in that installing thing, that matter of how at the front it asks, hey, what do you plan to use this for? And you're right, that's a bug, and I've reported it. I don't have the link off the top of my head, but that's a bug. There is no way to change it in the CF admin after the fact, but there is a file. There is a file where that value gets stored. I forget right off the top of my head. I don't want to try to guess it, but there is a file, and you can change it, and you can restart CF. And then it will send that information to Adobe on the next restart. And now they'll know that you're using it for test if you'd said production by mistake or vice versa. Okay. So I know that's a quick response. Not everybody's going to follow me, but I hope that Zoltan, you understood what I said. And there's Peter following up. Cool. Sid. Yep, exactly. Yep. I'd look forward to that. Susan, how is ColdFusion handling updates to Tomcat for security ZVs? Well, I commented on that. I commented on that. No, it runs on 9078. So let me be clear. You might have missed it. That's why I pointed it out. ColdFusion 2023 runs on 9.07.8, and ColdFusion 2021 runs on 9.07.8 as of the updates from October. As of the updates from October of last year, 6 months ago, whatever it is, 4 months ago, 5 months ago. So it is supporting that. But I pointed out when I said it that it's not on 9.08.5, which is another couple of updates beyond 9.07.8. And that you're asking, really, the question is, hey, when Tomcat comes out with a new version, how are we supposed to get that new version into ColdFusion? The answer is you cannot. Now, again, Mark or anybody from Adobe might want to chime in, but for now, the answer is no, you cannot. You must wait for Adobe to come out with an update. And when they come out with that update, they change the Tomcat, because it's a very customized implementation of Tomcat that underlies ColdFusion. And let's be clear, we're talking about ColdFusion, the server deployment, where you don't know what it is. You just install ColdFusion and you get it, and it runs under the covers. It's running on Tomcat. If you get Tomcat and you use ColdFusion mechanism to create a WAR file or use the downloaded available WAR file, you can deploy that WAR file on whatever Tomcat you want. And it listed on that other page what Tomcat versions are supported. And it said 9.07.2 and later at the time. So, that's a different subject. Anyway, moving on. SonarQube integration with CF 2018. I'm not aware of any details of how SonarQube does that integration or not. And anyway, with 2018, boy, you should not be running on that. But anyway, I'll leave you to look into that more. I don't have that answer, or somebody else might chime in. Finally, Susan, by the way, there are two Susans on the one that said now on my email. Is that did you give us that because you were expecting something in return? Because that Dave won the prize, so I'm not sure why you're giving us that email address. But while we wait for her to say why, anybody else have any other follow-up questions? And if not, we can see when you're typing. So once I see Susan's done, if there's no more, we will call it a day, because we're about 10, 15 minutes over now. Which I don't mind, but the recording is going to then therefore be long, and people are going, there's Charlie running long, run his mouth all the time. No, it wasn't another quiz. No, it was just a quick question. Sorry, thank you for asking. It wasn't a quiz. Sorry, didn't mean to get you too excited about that. No, there weren't two. There was only one. Thank you, though. Sorry about that.
And Charlie, there was one more question in the Q&A pod. How do I update my 2023 Developer Edition on Windows? Asked by Bill Brutzman.
Well, let's clarify, as I'm sure you would if you were talking to him. When you say how do you upgrade it, I think you're saying. By the way, I wish I could see it. Where's the Q&A pod? I'm not seeing it.
Should I want to make sure I say the right thing.
It's odd. I don't see it. I see the presenter chat. I see the attendee list. I see the host storyboard, flow notes. I see the useful links, and I see the lobby chat. I don't see the Q&A pod. Oh, wait, there it is. There it is. Sorry. Yeah, now I do. It's in the now. There's a bunch of them in there.
It's mostly people answering the question.
Cool. Thank you. Sorry, I wasn't seeing those. How do I update my 2023 Developer Edition on Windows? Well, Bill, preferably please don't type a reply in the Q&A, but please type a reply in the chat. It'll be more clear, because I've been so focused on that. When you say you want to update your 2023 Developer Edition, what do you want to update it to? Or did you mistype that and you meant, how do I update my 2021 to 2023? I'm thinking that might be what you meant. And I have an answer for that, but I want to make sure I know your question. That's why I wanted to make sure I read it, because I could infer the wrong thing. Again, when you say no, 2023, so please be clear, update it to what? Oh, do you mean, how do you go from the Developer Edition to standard or enterprise? Is that what you mean? You can say yes if that's what you mean. I realize you might be typing a longer answer. No, all the updates here. All the updates here. Well, let's be clear about something. There are updates to ColdFusion that come out sometimes every couple months, sometimes a little more often, sometimes a little less often. ColdFusion updates, if that's what you're asking about, I've been saying a few times that there were 6 updates to ColdFusion 2023, if that's what you're referring to. ColdFusion updates show up in the CF Administrator if you have an internet connection. When you go to the CF Administrator, it literally by default, normally for most people, it would literally check as soon as you go into the admin, and it would show a little asterisk in the top right corner of the admin. But that is predicated on you having told it when you installed it that you did want it to check. And some people inadvertently tell it, don't check, and they misinterpret that, and they think it means automatically apply the updates. Nothing automatically applies updates in ColdFusion. But to answer your question, if you go to the CF Administrator, on 2021 and above, it's the second button from the bottom left, and it's called the Package Manager page. And then in 2018, it was the last button on the left, and it was called Server Updates. Well, anyway, on that page, you will see a button that says Check for Updates. And when you click that Check for Updates, it will reach out to Adobe's website. Now, somebody might say, well, hold on, we're not on the internet. What are you supposed to do then, smart guy? Well, there's a complete documentation on doing updates when you're offline. And let me just say, first of all, if you Google the ColdFusion, docs for updating ColdFusion, you'll find the discussion of this in the docs. Then every update that comes out, there's a tech note for each update. And so real quickly, I just want to show you, if I just go ColdFusion 2023. Come on. ColdFusion 2023. We'll say update 6. That was the latest one that came out in November. I'm just going to click the link. Sorry, it took me to a page about the updates, and that's cool to know that there is a page of all the updates, and there's 6 and there's 5. Well, anyway, there's the article, the tech note about update 6. And when you go to these tech notes for the updates, this is the tech note for update 6. Down towards the bottom, it'll talk about how do you install them. So to answer your question, A, it's discussed at the bottom of the tech notes, but you wouldn't know about the tech note if you didn't know that the admin lets you see what updates were available. When you download an update in the admin, there's a link that says, show me the tech note, and here's the tech note. But again, you just Google the update name and you'll find it. And there's the package manager page I was telling you about. And then here's how to install the update offline. Now, I don't know that he was asking that question. I'm not looking yet at the chat, but I know some people go, we don't have internet access. We can't use the CF admin. How do we do an update? That's how you do it. It's discussed right there, and it's a couple steps, and it's not too difficult. All right. Updates in your talk. It's so cool. Thanks. Okay, cool. And lastly, let me say that I'll just quickly go to that presentations page. I also have a presentation on updating ColdFusion. I'm just going to go to the top here and just do, find, browser find, and say update. So there's updating the Java underlying ColdFusion. Some people need to know that, and I did a talk on that in January. And then here's keeping CF and Java updated, challenges and solutions. So I've addressed that sort of stuff over the years, and the installation talk on installing. There's installing ColdFusion 2023, but in December. And in there, I have a discussion on updating it. So it's a good question. It's not a bad question at all. It's not something that everybody knows. That's why I mentioned it in the talk. So thank you for asking. And yes, there is the CFPM, and I talk about that in that presentation. And I have a whole presentation on what the heck is the CFPM. It's called the many capabilities of the CF package manager. So again, whole talks on all these for those who want to. There you go. I could do it. I think I probably have somewhere some sort of meta thing like that. But thank you, Dave. All right. Bottom line is, yeah, look, anytime you have a question like that, of course, Google it, see what you can find. But if you come to this presentations page, you'll probably find that I've done some talk. And sometimes even ones from 5-10 years ago are just as valid now, because some things haven't really changed in the big picture. They haven't changed. And so what was said 5, 10, even 20 years ago, I've got some blog posts from literally 20 years ago I've pointed people to. They're still valuable. Anyway, moving on. I think that's it. Oh, there's some more typing going on. Sorry, Mark. I was about to say you could close the door. I've been thinking if you want to provide a second prize. And yeah, thank you.
You get 4.5 seconds, Susan.
No, that's not true. No, that's not true.
I'm kidding.
I know you are, but some people don't know that you are.
Charlie's presentations. Oh yeah. So yeah, I mean, I grew up on Charlie's presentations and Ben Nadell's blog posts for sure.
Yeah. And Ray Camden and Adam Cameron. We have a great community, lots of people. And even those old names, you might think, oh, I thought they left. No, they're back. There's lots of people that used to be gone that have come back. And so, yeah, it's a great community, still is, and great to see the new folks. And trust me, there's new folks. Trust me, I help new clients at least every month. I get a new client I'm helping, and they've never heard of me and asking questions like they're new to ColdFusion. So just believe it. It's not true that everybody's leaving ColdFusion. It's not true that nobody's still using ColdFusion. That's just not true. Mark can tell you, and they'll have talks probably at the CF Summit East on that, and certainly next year at CF Summit in Vegas. The keynotes often talk about that level of growth of the CF community.
Yeah, 100%, Charlie. You are 100% correct. I have been watching ColdFusion growing over the past couple of years. We are back. We are coming back. It's my job to say that, but it's also true.
Yeah, going strong. Back, baby. Cool. All right. Well, thanks everybody for your kind comments. And I think that's it for,